We're being sold this idea that we need immigrants from Muslim third world nations because otherwise our aging population will end up unable to support itself because we're not having enough children, and so there won't be enough taxpayers to pay into the system, enough workers to pay into the system to support us as we age, to support our healthcare expenses, our infrastructure expenses, and all the rest. That's just not true, because we don't actually need more workers. We need more automation. We need to use more robotics. We need more innovation. We need to get rid of the make busy jobs that aren't actually real or necessary. They're just there to keep people busy. We need to get rid of those. We need to innovate. We need to automate. We need to incorporate robots into more areas rather than rely on what is essentially slave labor. This is the truth about immigration that your politicians aren't telling you. It is not about compassion for third world people escaping war or economic disasters, poverty. That's not actually really what it's about. It's about bringing in new slaves for our corporate overlords.
It's about bringing in new slaves for our corporations.
It's about bringing in uneducated, low IQ people who will work for inhumanely low wages, in inhumane working conditions, while corporations continue to post record-breaking profits. That's what this is really about. Why has Angela Merkel started to step back from her position of pro-immigration, that Germany needed as many Muslim immigrants as possible? Well, she stepped back because corporations have realized that, in fact, these people that they're bringing in are not wanting to be the slaves of corporate masters. They are uneducated. They do have low IQs. They are in their homelands willing to work for inhumanely low wages in inhumane conditions, but they're not willing to do that when they come to Western countries. And the idea that the first generation won't, but their children will be more integrated and will adopt the dominant culture sufficiently to want to join the workforce, to be consumers, so that at least they're buying products from these companies, it's not panning out, because what some of these European countries are seeing is second and third generation people from these countries are not willing to be the slaves of these corporations. And they're not joining the workforce in high enough numbers in those jobs. Some corporations might be looking at short-term interests. For example, if you're selling iPhones and the people who buy a new iPhone every time you release a new version, so every year, are people between the ages of 16 and 37 or 38, let's just pretend I don't have the numbers in front of me, then if there are fewer and fewer people in that age range, then you have fewer and fewer consumers to sell to. Well, that's a problem if you're intent on increasing your profits every quarter, every year, always more and more and more profit. And so then you need to bring in more consumers, or you need to go into new markets. But if you go into new markets, then you have to negotiate with the governments of those countries. And sometimes they'll just take such a large cut that it's not actually very profitable. Or they will allow you to sell to their people, but then within a couple of years, they'll just have hijacked your technology and they'll create knockoffs of your product. And so then their people will only be given access to those knockoffs. And so it's much better to bring consumers into Western nations where we protect patents and where corporate rights are much more protected.